Alright, hey guys, Mr. West here. Today I'm going to show you how to model the miniature train in Fusion 360. So, first thing I'm going to do is, once I've opened Fusion 360, I am going to save my file. I'm going to call it train model, in this case, and I'm going to put my name. Train model West, and I'm going to save it in my admin project. You should save it in your default project, and I'm just going to click save. So I now have the file saved, and I'm going to start creating my model. I'm actually going to start at the back of the body of the train. So I'm going to start here on this XY plane, and I'm going to make the profile for this train. Alright, so I'm going to create the arc first. First thing I'm going to do is create this point. So I need this point to be, it's 1 inch in and 0.375 inches off of the origin. So it's 1 inch horizontally, so on the x-axis 1 inch horizontally, and then vertically on the y-axis I need it to be 0.375. What this is doing is creating the center point for the arc for the top of the train. And I'm going to go through, I'm going to create an arc, I'm going to use the center point arc. This means I start with my center point, so I click on the center point. My radius, according to my sketch, my dimensions, is going to be 2.35 inches. I'm going to click over here and click over here, which gives me enough room to make this entire shape. And I know it's going to start at the origin. I know it's going to be 2 inches wide, and it's going to have to be however many inches tall. It's going to snap automatically to that point, and we're going to go from there. I'm going to make sure this is dimensioned to 2 inches, not 2.008. And now we can see everything is fully constrained. So I'm going to go back in with my trim tool. I'm going to remove this line, I'm going to remove that line, and I'm going to remove that line. So now that just gives me the body of the train, the back of the body of the train, and I'm going to go in and extrude that out based on my sketch dimensions, which if we look at that, should be 1.75 inches, 1.75. I'm just going to hit enter. So now we have the back of the train, right? So that's what we should be looking at. Next thing I'm going to do is create the sketch that creates the front part of the train. So from there, I'm going to start with a rectangle. It's going to be 2 inches wide by 0.875 inches tall. So we start there. I'm going to go back in and add my dimension just to make sure we're correct. And then I'm going to create a circle right up about here. It doesn't matter how big it is because we're going to go back in and dimension it. So I'm given a radius of 0.75 inches. Fusion wants a diameter for this. So what I'm going to do is just take my 0.75 radius, multiply it by 2 to get 1.5 inches. And that's how we get our circle. Next thing I have to do is make sure that the circle is 1.375 inches above the base. So 1.375 inches above the bottom. And now we have our circle. I also need to go through and make sure that it is 1 inch in from the left side. So it's 1 inch in off of the origin on the x-axis. Now that's fully constrained. That's what I want. I want the black lines. I want everything to be dimensioned properly. Next thing I'm going to go do is go in and do this trim command so I can remove these excess lines just to kind of keep Fusion a little bit happier. And then I'm going to go through and extrude that. So that needs to be extruded to 5.5 inches. So I'm going to go off of my dimensions here. So I've got the base dimension for this is 1.75. The front of this needs to be 5.5 inches from this back side. So this is already 1.75 inches here. So I'm going to do a little bit of math in Fusion because we can do that. I'm just going to type 5.5 minus 1.75. Right, so 5.5 is the overall length that I want the train to be. 1.75 is the length of this back part. So it gives me that 3.75, which is the length that I need. And I'm just going to click OK. So now I've got kind of the rudimentary base of this train. I'm going to go through and add this notch at the back, which is just a circle. The radius is 0.5, so I need my diameter of 1. We're going to click OK, or hit enter. We're going to dimension it in, so it is 0.25 inches in on the x-axis. 0.25. And then it is 1.75 inches above the base. So we're going to go there, 1.75. And then I'm just going to hit Finish Sketch. Next thing I'm going to do is pull up my extrude command. I'm going to click on my geometry, and I'm just going to pull it through the base of the body of the train. Make sure that your operation is set to cut. It should automatically do this. If it doesn't automatically do this, go to your operation, make sure it's set to cut, because it may be set to join, which we don't want in this case. We want it to cut because we want to cut out that little notch. And that's that. So now we have the body of the train. The only thing we need to add now are going to be the tapped holes for the axes, or for the axles, for the cow catcher and for the stack. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is add the holes for the cow catcher at the front. What I'm going to do is create a sketch on the front face of the train. I'm going to add 3 points that will become our holes at a later point. So I'm just going to kind of put 3 holes kind of close-ish to where it needs to go. I'm going to use my sketch dimension, and I'm going to read my dimension drawing and see that this one is 0.375 inches in from the edge. Not 3.75, 0.375. I'm just going to hit enter. It is also 0.125 inches above the base. So I've got 0.125, and I'm going to hit enter. I'm also going to use this horizontal vertical constraint to constrain this point horizontally to that point, just to avoid repeating a dimension and kind of using some of the more constraint features of Fusion 360, just to make our lives a little bit easier. So that one was 0.375 in, this one's 0.375 in, so to this point, right, if we go and look at our dimensions, that's going to be 1.625, and I'm just going to hit enter. So that puts that there. This middle point is going to be exactly 1 inch in from the edge, and it is going to be, what does that say, 0.625 above this. So here we're using what's called chain dimensioning, where this is a chain dimension, so from my base to this point, we have one dimension, and from this point to this point, we have another dimension. Versus base dimensioning, we have our base, we have one dimension to here, one dimension to here, and one dimension to here. There's different ways. The reason why we do these different ways is just so we know, for locating parts, for making sure that parts are put in the correct placement relative to one another. Because sometimes it may be more important that this hole and this hole are a certain distance apart versus a certain distance from here to here, right? So we just kind of go through and we specify which dimensions we want that are the critical dimensions. So now that I have these points, I'm going to hit Finish Sketch. I'm going to use my Hole tool, and I'm going to click these 3 points. It's going to make the holes that are not right. So I got to go back in and read on my dimension drawing. It says I have holes that are diameter of 0.125, and they go 0.125 inches deep, and there are 3 of them. So I'm going to set my depth, which is the top one, 0.125, and then I'm going to set my width of 0.125. I'm going to leave this at 118 degrees because it does say all holes are drilled with point angles, so that tells me that it's using a pointed drill bit to make these holes. So I'm just going to leave the standard 118 degrees because that's the standard pitch of a drill bit. Once I have those holes, I'm just going to click OK. So now I have those 3 holes. All right, next thing we're going to do is create a work plane to add a hole at the top of the train for the stack. So I'm going to do a tangent plane up here at the top, and I just want it to be 0 degrees, and right, we can go in and look at it, right, it is tangent to the top of that circle, or that cylinder. So I'm just going to click OK, and I have this work plane now. So I went up here to construct, I did tangent plane, and then I did the plane tangent to this cylinder. Next thing I'm going to do is go in and create a sketch so I can put a point for that hole to be created. I know that it's going to be on the middle axis, right, so right in here, and it's going to be about 0.875 inches in. So I'm going to grab my dimension tool, go here to here. So as what happened there is because I clicked in this origin point, that is going to be an issue, so I'm actually going to go through and delete that point. We're going to start again, and I'm going to not click in that point. I'm going to click right about there. So now when I go into dimension, it's not going to get mad at me, and we're going to do that 0.875 as it specifies in the dimension drawing. And then just to make sure we're fully constrained, I'm going to go from here to here. I should get 1 inch just to make sure that it's perfectly centered. Shouldn't be a problem otherwise. It should be smart enough to do that. Next thing I'm going to do is create this hole. This hole is going to be 0.5 inches in diameter. And it is going to be 0.25 inches deep. I'm going to leave the pointed drill bit on there. I'm not going to change any of the hole taps or anything. I'm just going to create that hole. And voila, we have the hole for the stack. Alright, next thing we're going to do is create the holes for the axles. I'm going to go in and create a sketch again on this side. And I'm going to add my 2 points. I'm just going to pop one here and pop one there. Because again, we're going to go back in and dimension it. So my point here needs to be 1 inch in from the edge. 1 inch. And it needs to be 0.5 inches from the base. So we're going to do 0.5. Oh, hey, look at that. Perfect. This other one, where'd it go? Where'd my other point go? There it is. Needs to be also 0.5 inches. But again, I'm going to use the horizontal constraint to constrain it to this point. And then I'm going to use my dimension tool to find where this goes. So I have that chain dimension, or that base dimension from here to this point. And I'm going to go to the point to the edge, and it's supposed to be 4.5 inches across. Now we're going to hit OK. I'm going to finish my sketch, and then I'm going to create a sketch on the other side. That did not go on the right plane. We're going to create a sketch on this plane. And the other thing I'm going to do, hopefully, is project this geometry. So I hit P on my keyboard, and then I can go through and select the 2 points that I just made because they're already kind of highlighted, and I'm just going to hit OK. So what that did is it duplicated the points on the other side of this train. So I was able to make really just one set of points and duplicate it for both sides. So I'm going to click Finish Sketch because I finished my sketch. I'm going to go back into my hole tool. I'm going to select from sketch multiple holes. So I'm going to select these holes. I'm going to select these points. I'm going to select all 4 of these points. It won't let me select them on this side. Okay, we're going to have to do 2 features. Just kidding. And these holes are going to be 1/4 20 UNC. So first thing I need to do is go to tapped holes, because when it says 1/4 20 UNC, that specifies a hole or a thread diameter and thread specifications. So I need to go in and say it's a tapped hole, meaning it has threads in it. I don't want to do any offset. I just want to do a regular full thread. I'm going to leave the drill point as an angle. We're not doing any counter bore or counter sinking. But I do want to make sure I'm set to ANSI unified screw threads. I'm going to change it from 0.5 to 0.25 so I can get my 1/4 20 UNC. Class doesn't matter. Direction, we want right hand, right? We want a normal screw. We don't want it to back itself out. You know, we don't want a left-handed screw. We can also check modeled in here, which is just a kind of neat feature of Fusion 360. So right in here, what we're looking at is actually just a kind of generic thread, but if I check this box, it's going to properly model that thread. It's a little bit harder for the computer to model this. So I will uncheck it for now just to keep the model a little bit more simplistic, and just keep my system resources a little bit down. So I'm going to hit OK there, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to use my hole tool, click on these 2 points, and it actually carried my settings over from the last screw. So I actually don't need to change anything, right? It's still that. Oh, I actually messed up. My bad. So I didn't read the dimension drawings properly. It's 0.875 deep. So I'm going to go back and change that on the last hole. And I'm just going to hit OK here. Right, so 1/4 20 UNC, 0.875 inches in depth. I'm going to go back and edit these holes. I just double click on the hole, and I'm just going to go back and change this to 0.875 and then hit OK. So now I have the base of the train body, fully modeled and ready to go. So I'm going to make sure I save this. My version description is fine, user saved, that's okay. And I have that saved, and now I'm ready to move on to the next part. Alright, hey guys, editing Mr. West here. So I was going back through my footage and realized I forgot to add the fillet to all of my edges. So if you look at the dimension drawing, we can see that it says round all edges are 0.1 except for drilled holes. So I'm going to pull up my fillet tool. I'm just going to go ahead and start selecting all of my edges. The highly technical process of clicking on everything. Click, click, click. I just got to go in and select all the edges. Once they're all blue, then we know we have done it properly. So I'm going to go through here. We can also look at the end of the document to see where all of the edges are going to be rounded. So I'm just going to keep clicking through here. Okay, and I have all the edges selected. I'm going to go in and insert my fillet width of R 0.1. Just double checking here, 0.1. And I'm going to hit OK. And that's that. We'll see you in the next one. Train. Would help if I could spell. Train. Model. That was too many mistakes. We're starting over.